from the Cyber Hub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the Cyber Hub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Acer.
And here we are, Thursday, October 14th, 2021. My name is James McQuiggan. James Acer is out today. He's had a fun family event occur. All's good. He'll be back on Monday. So don't adjust your sets. This is the Practitioner Brief. I'm real excited to be back here again today, talking with all of you and sharing with you the latest stories that we've got going on in the industry. So certainly a good morning to Eddie from the Big D in Texas. So if you're joining us now, let me know where you're connecting from. It's always good to see folks and see where they're coming from. So as always, gotta thank KnowBe4 as one of the sponsors for the Practitioner Brief that helps support Mr. Acer, and of course have to do the ever famous coffee cup cheers. Good morning to Matt. Welcome. Glad to have you here. And hopefully everybody is having a great Thursday. Here we are on Friday's Eve and getting ready for our weekend. And we're not that far out from Halloween, which I know a lot of folks are excited. So we've got Chicago, someone from Chicago. That's fantastic. McQuiggan, Hack James. Yes, that's McQuiggan with an AN on the end, not an IN. But thanks, Matt. Yeah, I didn't hack James. He had a little bit of a family event, and so he called me up and said, McQuiggan, I need you to step in, man. Can you take care of it? And I'm like, you got it, dude. So had the pleasure of hosting the show yesterday. Looking forward to doing it again today. So excited that we've got everybody here connecting and joining us. He had the baby. Send me a cigar, says Eddie. Yeah, I was going to leave that surprise for James to tell everybody, but sure, why not? I'll let him fill in all the details. The baby watch has finally ended, and the baby has arrived. But James will be back on Monday, and I'm sure he'll have no doubt he'll be filling everybody in with regards to the excitement that's happened there. Good morning to Jessica. Thank you for joining. And certainly, yes, Matt, congrats are in order. So I think I said it already, but you know what? You can't ever do it enough times. So coffee cup cheers. James, Mr. Acer, always has his double espresso with the nice foam. I'm here today, of course, with my Tim Hortons. Can't see it. There we go. With my Tim Hortons coffee, my Canadian coffee. Always enjoy the flavor of this bean. So very good. All right, so let's get to today's stories. Well, the first one's up, and I'm just going to zip through this one real quick. Intel and VMware join the Patch Tuesday parade. Everybody gets in on Patch Tuesday parade these days. And Intel and VMware jumping in. One of the ones dealing with Intel dealt with their software guard extensions, the SGX, had a high score of 8.2 that they were classifying as high risk, because it was going to allow escalation of privileges. So if you're using that particular product, be aware. And then, of course, with VMware, they had an open direct flaw with regards to their product with the vRealize. Essentially, you know, we're seeing Adobe, we've got Intel, we got VMware. They're all coming out with their patches and showing them out on that second Tuesday of every month, which I know keeps all of the system administrators busy and pulling out their hair, because the change management crew and team, they got to go through and review all these and get them out. So hopefully, you know, along with the Apple fixes that came out, the critical flaws that there were, you know, it's keeping everybody on their toes. So make sure we're keeping up to date with our change management, looking at those priorities. And let's move on to our second story of the day. And what we're dealing with here is SnapMC, an extortionist hacker group, basically breaches networks in under 30 minutes. For some folks, this could be news. Some folks just never really get an understanding of how fast do those cyber criminals really work. We've seen the Dharma, the Crima hacker group that do ransomware attacks. They're getting in and out in 30 minutes. And here we have SnapMC. They're exfiltrating those web applications and VPN solutions to gain access into the network. And then once they get in, they're doing reverse PowerShell. They get that access and they're looking at escalating their privileges, taking control, keeping their persistence, just like they do once they gain access. They want to keep a foothold inside that network. So make sure that we're keeping those external devices, web applications up to date, patched and secured, so that we can reduce the risk of any of these type of attacks from happening. And then, of course, they just rely on the phishing emails, but that's a different story altogether. So, first two stories, looking at making sure we're keeping our patches, change control and change management programs up to date. All right. I slipped this one at the last minute. I apologize. I couldn't update LinkedIn with the link, but you probably can Google it. But Acer confirms a breach after sales service systems in India. They basically launched once they discovered the issue, apparently they did it pretty quick, but they were able to, put in all their security protocols, do a full scan of the systems. They haven't provided who's done it, but basically we've seen that these attacks have gone on. And they're providing samples. Now, the unfortunate thing about all this is the fact that this is their second breach in 7 months. We're starting to see a lot more repetition with the different cyber criminal groups going after organizations a second and third time, most likely because they realize that it takes a while for these organizations, these large organizations, to get the funding, get the systems in place and everything else. And of course, they're still ripe for target and hitting them up again for the second time. All right. Our good friend, Mr. Brian Krebs, reported yesterday about how Coinbase phishers steal one-time passwords. And we're always talking, and in cyber insurance folks and cybersecurity folks, we're always talking about multi-factor authentication. And we've been saying for years, the OTPs through the smartphones, not the most secure way to do your MFA. But it is certainly one method better than a username and password. And here we had a cyber criminal group basically emailing people. It was really interesting how they were going through and figuring out who had user accounts, basically pulling from most likely one of the big giant combs, the collection of massive breaches, all those email addresses, trying them against Coinbase, seeing which ones were coming up and they were scripting this, coming in and seeing which ones had email addresses, and then phishing those people and saying, hey, we need to do a password reset. It actually went to a website, coinbase.com.password-reset.com. Pretty crafty. Well, a lot of people fell for it. The whole security folks were able to discover the phishing, get access to the website, and basically found a whole series of different phishing attacks and the money that was getting netted in there from that. But the crafty part of it is when somebody was visiting that site, they got a ding at the other end at the cyber criminal call center. Basically, then they connected and interacted with the victim, asked them for the 6-digit number, and they were stealing the OTPs that way, gaining access. And we've been seeing a lot of different attacks going on over the last several months with regards to these coin exchanges. Most likely because that's where all the money is. No doubt cyber criminals love to go where the money is because that's what they're in it for. Bottom line, plain and simple, they just want to make money. And so that's what they're going after. But pretty well, Coinbase released a statement basically saying, hey, we're with a large organization like us with the money, we're constantly attacked. They're constantly tuning their models, making sure that they're keeping their perimeter secure and protected. Because we know last month with Coinbase, about 6,000 of their customers got hit. And so the cyber criminals are taking advantage of that and basically going after them, figuring out who's got an email address, who belongs to Coinbase, and going after them and saying, hey, you got to do a password reset. And people most likely aware of the fact that Coinbase had their issue are clicking on that link and unfortunately falling for it. That use of social engineering comes through quite well. Moving on, kind of shifting out of the Coinbase, kind of the financial aspect, looking at still another big hot ticket item with regards to cybersecurity. Google does an analysis of over 80 million ransomware samples. Here's what they found, and this is what I thought was interesting, doing this as a tribute for James today, because Israel is the leading country in turning in samples of ransomware attacks. Probably most likely because they're constantly under attack, just like all the other organizations that are out there. And they are getting hit by ransomware all the time and submitting in those samples. Google released a report a report. Basically, Israel, South Korea, Vietnam are the top most affected countries that are out there that are getting hit, that are submitting these into virus total. Basically, a 600% increase compared to almost everybody else. GanCrab is pretty well one of the leaders that are out there. Babook Ransomware Gang is another one. All these different groups that are constantly coming out with their different ransomware samples. Interestingly enough, Windows, the Windows Defender is actually able to detect about 95% of them, which is a good thing. Because actually over this past weekend, in preparation for one of my classes teaching about ransomware, I'm trying to infect my own machine with ransomware. Yeah, I know I could just go put it on the internet and somebody will do it for me, but I want to do it in a controlled environment. And when I ran all the ransomware applications that I'd gotten from a certain part of the web, Microsoft detected and removed pretty well almost all of them. And then prevented the other ones from running. So I got to do what the cyber criminals do. I got to shut down the Windows Defender to make it work. So, because that's pretty well what they're doing when they're getting into these systems, disabling the antivirus or have other bypasses to get around it. So, again, being aware of the different ransomware attacks, having that awareness is always a good thing. Speaking of ransomware, Sophos came out and discovered that there is a Python ransomware script that targets specifically ESXi servers. You know, basically you get your hands on, you start encrypting one of those VMware servers, and essentially you're not just taking down one system, you're taking down multiple ones. I think the whole file was about 6 kilobytes in style. Interestingly named Python script file. I think they're just missing the U in there. But basically, when it comes to the hypervisors, the VMware, ESXi, make sure you're following the recommended and security best practices to secure those systems, disabling the certain shell commands and capabilities that are in there to prevent this kind of thing from happening. But they were doing things like encryption keys being generated on the fly, new emails being generated, and targeting those hypervisors. This has already been out in the wild already. So folks had it with one of their particular attacks, released a report about it. And as they're claiming, hey, we'll even detect the script. So that's out there as well. But essentially, cyber criminals are always looking for different ways to gain access into these systems, looking at big target systems, and whether it's VMware or VirtualBox or the cloud environment, they're always looking to get the biggest score, the biggest return, bang for their buck, just like we are in our business when it comes to the ROI. Finally, I want to wrap up with a fun, interesting story. I read this one yesterday and saw that it got reported a little more yesterday and decided to include it. A senior at a high school in Illinois in a small school district, in his early days in high school, watching YouTube videos, learned about scanning networks, and him and a couple of his buddies scanned their school network and ironically ended up taking down part of the network at school, got caught, got told off. But he realized that there were systems in there that weren't patched, they weren't up to date, and he figured, I'm going to have to use this at some point for my senior prank. Well, he did just that. And the Xterity devices that are used for closed circuit TV for transmitting images, videos, and whatever within the school environment, he was able to gain access into them through a 0-day, exploit them, and essentially played a Rickroll video throughout all the campuses in the school district that had those devices. And essentially, as soon as the video and the attack launched, but 2 minutes later, he sent a very detailed report of how he got in there, recommendations on what the school needs to do, sent it to the superintendent, the head of IT for the school, and they dragged him in shortly thereafter, or about a week later. Ironically, they didn't press charges. They thanked him for his work and what he did in identifying those issues. But interesting senior prank as we get, I'm sure a lot of folks are in their senior year of high school or even college, but there you go. Rick rolling everything for a senior prank at school. Hopefully the kid ends up in a good place going to college, becomes a white hat for us all. Well, that's pretty well all the stories I've got for today. James will be back on Monday. I've thoroughly enjoyed the last few days doing this, sharing these stories with you, sharing the risks and tips and things that you can do. Again, want to be able to thank KnowBe4. Want to thank all of you for attending. Thanks for David for coming out. And again, thanks for Christopher. Appreciate you all coming out and supporting the Practitioner Brief. It's a great series of a good way to kind of get caught up with the stories for every day. So definitely check it out on a regular basis. Everybody, have yourself a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. And James will see you all on Monday. Take care, everybody.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.